You've got ideas, you've got ambition, you've got no time, or so you think. I'm Marissa Lonick, and I help busy moms with big dreams and no time. Join me each week as I dive into time management strategies, goal setting and achieving framework, and inspiring guests who are juggling mom life, work life, fill in the blank life. Dreams don't work unless you do, and just because you're a mom doesn't mean you can't still make it happen, whatever it means to you. Welcome to the Mama Work It podcast. Hello, mama friends. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Mama Work It podcast. Today, we are chatting with Taylor Day, aka Dr. Tay, a child psychologist and mindset coach for high-achieving mamas. Her area of specialty is in supporting moms of children with autism or those concerned about their children's development. Now, I think this topic is something we don't often hear about as much when we're looking to find support for our kids, especially our kids with special needs. And, I love that we are talking about supporting the mamas, right? Running the show behind the scenes there, not just the children who obviously need the support and we're giving them that support, but also the moms. So Dr. Tay is going to be sharing her best tips, hacks, and ways to ensure you are able to show up as the best version of yourself so that your kiddos who need you are getting the best support and parenting environment for their needs. Dr. Tay, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Okay, first things first, talk to us about your journey as a child psychologist and your affinity for working with children with autism.
Yeah. I have literally been in the autism field for over a decade at this point. I knew pretty early on that this was the population that I wanted to work with. Even I started as early as undergrad doing research on autism and then transitioned after undergrad to doing some post-bac work, which is pretty common in for clinical psychology PhD programs is you'll have research experience. And so even right there, it was like, okay, we're going to find an autism job. And I was able to do that. And then all through my PhD as well, which was at Florida State University, my specialty was in autism, particularly the early diagnosis and early intervention of autism. So everything I've done, every step of the journey has been about, understanding autism and being able to support families, to learning more about it, to getting their child diagnosed, to knowing what right therapies, are going to help support their child. But I also realized through this journey that what was happening is I would give a diagnosis, for example, and I do as a clinician create space of like asking the parent how they're processing it, what it's like to hear the diagnosis, how they're feeling, and we talk about that. But that's a short-lived conversation. I also know that not all providers do that. And so I realized that there was just this missing support for parents of autistic children. And that they didn't have a place to be able to process all their emotions, or, a lot of worry thoughts come up. Plus, the other thing is life in many ways is the same as it was pre-diagnosis, where you have all your other responsibilities. You're still, potentially you have a career or a business you're running. You're still managing your household. You might have other children. You have a huge mental load. And then you add on, there's often a huge time commitment that comes with autism, running your child to the different therapies, also thinking about, what's the next best step for your autistic child, having to advocate for them, all of that. And so I just realized that was such a missing piece. And so I decided to also become certified in a mindset coaching program that really, is focused on thoughts and feelings so that I could support parents in a different way. Even with my background, like there is therapy, doing with parents, but really helping to support the whole family is what my mission is.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, because the harsh reality is life does go on, right? There are things that don't stop. And even though you might feel in that moment of getting that diagnosis or just in the day to day challenges, like you are like, oh my gosh, how do I give my child the support they need, the undivided attention they need, yet still juggle all of these other things I need to do? And if you have more kids, right?
Right.
That in itself is a juggle. So I love that you're able to provide support for all of those sort of unmentioned things that are going on, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's like my whole mission, honestly, is to have a place that autism parents can feel seen, heard, and supported. Because there's not a lot of places for that. And to be able to discuss the unique challenges that come up with autism, and helping parents also become more aware about neurodiversity and educating them on how do they talk with other people about their child's diagnosis, and how do they support their child in a way that is ultimately going to help their child thrive, which is the goal of every parent. So
Yeah. Yeah. So tell us, what are some common trends you see when it comes to the moms or the parents supporting kids with autism?
yeah. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that comes to front of mind right away, and I say this in the most loving, supportive way, is that a lot of times I see autism parents kind of shut off their own emotions to get done what they need to get done. And even sometimes in my own clinical practice, like I do, again, because I know the value of this, I love creating space for the parents to be able to share their experiences. And sometimes it's like, okay, let's chat about this. And it's kind of like, oh, I'm fine. And I know, having been in this field for so long, I know that there are some worries that are coming up or some emotions that are coming up. And it feels really adaptive just to shut that off so you can get done everything that you need. But the reality is that, what we know is leads to this path of burnout, where you're not in touch with like your thoughts and feelings and really having the space to process it. And so it can lead to like burnout. It can lead to sometimes resentment. Um, Unfortunately, we do know statistics. There is a really, really high divorce rate among parents of autistic children. And so it can lead to things like reduced communication, between partners, and adding a stress on the marriage. And so it seems like, okay, this is adaptive to shut off my feelings just to operate, by a checklist basically. Where does my kid need to be? Okay, what intervention, are we working on? How do I support my kid? But it's way more complex than that. And a lot of times what seems adaptive in the short term doesn't end up serving the family in the long term.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Because as you're talking about that, it makes me think of like even just moms in general or parents in general who are putting themselves at the bottom of the to-do list, right? And this could
Mhm.
be viewed as a form of taking care of yourself, is expressing these feelings, kind of working through this situation. And then when we do that, what happens to the thing at the bottom of the to-do list? It never gets done, right? You just shift it to the next day and shift it to the next day and shift it to the next day. And then you end up really not doing it. And you do burn out and you do get resentful and you do get really stressed, and you sort of are operating from this place. And I can only imagine when you are dealing with, something like this where it can feel really heavy at certain times, how suppressing that could really be a huge disservice in the long run.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's exactly it. This is a phenomena that occurs with moms, I find in particular, across the board. I just think that sometimes it ends up being amplified when you have, an autistic
For
child,
sure.
because, there's a little bit. there's other reasons too for this, but there's even more mental load than, a mom of a neurotypical child is holding. Um, and that is not to discredit either the mental load that the mom of a neurotypical child is holding as well. Like, it is a lot on any individual. And so I see this pattern too, like just across the board. It feels easier to kind of just shut off to perform. And then a lot of times, what I find too is working with parents. Again, particularly moms, you want to go to that quick external fix of being like, but how do I solve this problem? And that feels really rewarding in the moment of like, okay, great, I tackled it. But that doesn't often lead to longevity of being a solution, because the same habits of thinking, which is how our brain thinks, those are like our default thought patterns. All of our brains are wired in a certain way. Those uh, same habits of thinking that got you to the original kind of spot where things were feeling rough, if you haven't changed those, even if you add in an external fix, most likely those same habits of thinking are going to come up and sabotage you from being able to maintain that external fix. And so, while it feels nice and warm and fuzzy to have these quick fixes, what we often find is there's got to be some of this inner work that occurs along with these external strategies, because there's some amazing ones, and I know you teach some incredible ones as well. But how do we get that inner being in alignment with what we're actually doing and trying to shift?
Yeah, I could not agree more. I am in total, like, we are so in sync on this because even when it comes to managing your time, yes, there are totally hacks out there. There are like tools and systems and, ways you can be going about your life. However, right, it's not sustainable long term if you haven't done that inner mindset work. I'm in total agreement. I love how this spans across all different areas of life. It makes 1,000% sense to me. All right. Well, we know it's already a challenge for moms to raise kids and be, high achieving professionals and all of the things that we're doing. Now throw in an autism diagnosis, and it's just a whole nother area to navigate. So tell us what steps or tips you typically help moms who are in this space, really thrive in all areas of life.
Yeah. I mean, I think for one, it seems interesting because it's like, okay, is this a solution? But I feel like that when you can find someone to work with that just gets you, that gets what you're going through, that creates so much this ability to feel seen and heard, right? And it's such a powerful effect that sometimes it's a little bit, and I will give tips and strategies, but it's a little less about those tips and strategies, but it's this feeling that you're not alone. And so one of the things that has inspired me in this realm, and I'm getting ready, it's literally launching any day, is I am creating a free Facebook community for autism parents to really focus on their own personal growth and their empowerment and being able to step in that and being in a community of like-minded people. But this community is a little bit different than your classic support group, where the goal is really about you, your personal growth. And also, it's a safe place to be able to ask questions. I unfortunately see in other kind of communities sometimes, I'm in a lot of like Facebook groups, is that sometimes parents are shamed for asking questions.
Mm.
And I never want someone to feel that way. That feels of really high value, that even if you in your heart you're like, is this a dumb question? I want you to ask it, because where else are you going to ask it? And so I think that's one thing, is being able to have someone that understands you, whether or not it's someone like me. It could be a family member, or it could be another autism parent that really gets you. But that is something we talk about, is building a community, because this autism journey can be really, really lonely. I talk with parents a lot. I also see it in different Facebook groups where it's like, like if they have mom friends that of neurotypical children, it's like, Yeah, like I feel uncomfortable saying, "Oh my gosh, my child pointed for the first time today." And their child pointed at 12 months and say they have a 3-year-old. That is so huge. And to not be able to celebrate those wins and those victories, I mean, that creates a feeling of loneliness. So having people that you really feel safe with is definitely something. And I love also being that person for the families that I work with. I think other kind of, tips and strategies is I think creating time for yourself to feel is super important, to let your brain worry a little bit about what your child's future is going to be like, or if you're doing enough for them. And almost, it's called worry time. It's literally like set a timer though. The goal is not for this worry time to bleed into everything, but get those thoughts out, because all we're doing when we have them and we just push them down is we're suppressing them, and they will come out in another way. It might not make sense. I always use the analogy of like, okay, you might be pushing them down, and then all of a sudden, maybe like, and maybe it's even your neurotypical child, if you have more than one child, spills a glass of milk and you just completely lose it, right? And then later you're like, why did I lose it over a glass of milk? It's because of all that suppression. Literally every emotion is being channeled on that glass of spilled milk. And so I think allowing that space and that worry time can be actually really productive, but people are afraid to go there. Yeah. So I know I've been talking a lot, so I'll pause there, but I'm sure I could come up with others too.
Yeah, no, I love that example because I have definitely flipped out over a glass of spilt milk here. And I got to check myself in those moments. And when I do check myself, I'm like, is this about the milk? No, it's not about the milk at all. It's about the fact that I'm feeling angry about this, or I'm exhausted, or I haven't processed, what happened yesterday, or like I'm really feeling down about something at work and I'm totally taking it out on this moment. So, yes,
Mhm.
yes, yes. I love it. And I love how you said set a timer. And I'm curious, what's like a good amount of time to give yourself for worry time?
I mean, what I tend to tell people, but don't be afraid to do a little less than this, a little more than this. 20 minutes tends to be, because you can get a lot out in 20
That's a
minutes
lot
and
of
you could,
worry time. That's a lot of worries.
it is, it is, right? But that's the thing. And you might say, it's like more giving yourself permission to do this. You might actually be like, I only needed 5 minutes of that, but you don't feel rushed in that process.
Mm.
You're really creating that space. And sometimes what I find, and I'll be even honest, this happens to me personally. And I think it's just being human that sometimes when I allow myself to create space for the thoughts, the feelings come. So I might end up crying, for example. And I share that because I want to normalize, like, yeah, that is so normal, right? Feeling these emotions, letting things out. And so it might turn into, more just like expressing how you're feeling in that moment. And then you're giving yourself a little bit of time to compose yourself to be able to transition back to life, because you don't, that's the other thing I would suggest with this. You don't want to just like cut it off and be like, okay, like give yourself a little bit of that transition time to go back into your reality so it doesn't feel so stark of a difference.
Okay. Yeah. I like that you said that. Would you also recommend during this worry time, like, should you be journaling these worries? Should you just be like in a meditative state thinking about them? Like, what's your best recommendation of how to go about doing it?
Yeah, I really don't prefer a certain way or another. I think explore and see what feels right. We do know, though, from like neuroscience research, that actually writing things down are processed differently in the brain, and like pen to paper type of thing. Or it can be like an iPad with a like pencil, that works similarly, but typing doesn't quite get processed the same way. But I also sometimes think like and I can speak again from personal experience, like sometimes when I'm driving alone in the car, or like I'm like on a walk, like that's where so much comes to me. And it's like in those moments I can't journal or write. So you might play around of what feels the most helpful for you. But my guess is more likely than not, you're going to get a little bit of a download in this moment where it's going to be either something that inspires you or something you want to do. So I would have some way something nearby to be able to jot down some of these ideas, because it might be like a little mantra that you need throughout the day of like, I'm doing the best that I can. Or, I love this one. I am the perfect parent for my child. Um, and sometimes you need those mantras to get you through the day. So if you get one of those downloads, kind of jotting it down.
Yeah. Or you can tell Siri to jot it down for you if you're
Oh,
driving.
yes. There you go.
Yeah. I like that you said that because, it is hard to always create that time and space. And 20 minutes, while it isn't a lot of time during the day, it can feel like, oh my gosh, how will I ever get 20 minutes to do this? So if you are, alone going to like pick up your kid from school, sitting in the car line, like these are the times you can be doing this, right? I mean,
Mhm.
obviously you have to be safe. You want to be pay attention to the driving and all of those things. But if you're sitting in a parked car waiting on, the car line or something, I know our car line takes a while at our school, like that
Mhm.
could be a great time. It doesn't have to be 20 minutes. It can be 5, it can be 10. So do what works for you. But I really love giving the time and space to this worry time. It's a great practice. Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And put on some sunglasses. Like if you're in the car pickup line, right? No, in case you cry, like again, super normal to cry, put on some sunglasses. No one will notice. And the other thing I want to say is like generally I say 20 minutes, but if you have 5 minutes, that is better than nothing. Like the whole concept of this is not really about the allotted time. It's more giving yourself permission to think and feel and process, which often as a parent is really hard to create that space and time. And so that's ultimately what it's about. So focus on like anytime you can get, that is a win. It's not about some set amount of time that is the magic sauce.
Yeah, love it. The consistency. Love it. All right. So, what if we have a listener right now? Let's say a mom is listening. She's having a challenging time understanding her kiddo. Like maybe she's got a hunch, an inclination. It could be autism, but there hasn't been a diagnosis yet. This is all new territory for her. What would you advise her to be her first step here in the process?
Absolutely. I think it's so important to know, where to go and how to navigate this. So, first off, the pediatrician is always a great place to start talking. And don't be afraid to schedule an additional visit with your pediatrician and say, listen, this is what I need to talk about. A lot of times, many pediatricians will help you navigate in finding the right resources and the right next steps. With that being said, especially, with really young children, I do find that sometimes pediatricians take a wait and see approach where it's like, oh, yeah, they're fine. Well, let's just monitor them. And you, as the parent, are so incredibly concerned. And so this feels like a mismatch where you're like, they're saying for me not to be concerned. I feel very concerned. And it's like, what do I do then? And what I will tell you is I want you to lean into what I often call a mommy gut. Dads have it too. I tend to talk to moms the most, but a mommy gut and not being afraid to say, listen, am I really worried about my child? And if so, don't stop at the pediatrician. So other ways that you can, get support. If your child is under 3, you can go to if you're in the United States, to your state's early intervention program. You don't need any sort of diagnosis. They can evaluate your child to see, do they need speech language therapy? Do they need occupational therapy? All of that. If your child is older than 3, they're going to go through the school system. So you actually can go to your child's school and express your concerns there as well. I will say there can be some resistance on the school side too, where sometimes it's like, no, we're not seeing those concerns. And so this can be really hard because you're having all of these professionals potentially say, there's nothing wrong. I'll hear parents tell me, like, yeah, like I was told I was overreacting, that I was just worrying too much. And the reality is, most parents' intuition is incredibly strong, is what I found. More often than not, when a parent is saying, I'm really concerned that it's autism, for example, although this could apply across the board, more often than not, parents are right. And so I want to empower you that you are the expert of your child. Yes, you may be surrounded by professionals who are experts in different areas, your pediatrician in child health and development, the school in terms of education, all of that. I even say I am an expert in autism, but only you are the expert of your child. And so, what you should be looking for are people that are going to work collaboratively with you, that are going to empower you as a parent, that are going to listen to what you're saying. And so, what I would say in this regard is, if you're getting a lot of resistance, you have a lot of concern. I know this isn't always possible, but it is okay to pivot and change pediatricians. It is also okay. There are some insurance boundaries, which you can call your insurance and talk to them. But you can also reach out to a child psychologist directly most of the time. Most don't need a referral from the pediatrician. Psychology Today is a great place to look for resources. You can also ask your insurance provider for a list of child psychologists. A developmental pediatrician is another one you can see as well, that would be able to do some of this evaluation. And then, keeping in mind, again, I'm going to say this with a caveat though, that I know this is not feasible for all families, but if you do have insurance limits, or insurance sometimes can delay the process, if you have the finances, private pay, like paying out of pocket, tends to be a quicker path, and you definitely don't need a referral at that point. So keep all of those things in mind. But the biggest piece of advice I have is, do not be afraid to keep advocating for your child. You, as the parent, are the only one that can do that. Most likely, your kid is not of the age range that they're going to be able to advocate for themselves. And even if they are, think about how much complexity there is for you as a parent, as an adult. And so, even if your child is older, still advocating for their own, mental health and developmental support is challenging.
Yeah. Ugh, every time you said that, I got chills because it's like, it's so important. It's so important to be that person. And it can feel like a lot of pressure, but
It can.
it can, but it doesn't have to, right? It doesn't have to
Hmm.
be harder than it is, right? We can still advocate, we can still do what we need to do and not make it complicated. Like you said, if you're a pediatrician and you are head to head every time you're having a conversation, hey, maybe it's time to just find a new fit. Maybe it's a mismatch, right?
Hmm.
If you're not comfortable with the first opinion, let's just go get a second opinion, right? Like,
Hmm.
it doesn't have to feel so daunting.
Right.
So I'm glad that you said that. I am a big fan of trusting your intuition and following kind of what your body, your soul is telling you to do. And what's the worst that could happen? If you follow it and it turns out to be, unnecessary. Okay, so you've wasted a little bit of time, but you have peace of mind. And now you're not
Yep.
spending those worry moments worrying about this, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the reason it often feels daunting too is because, I'm just going to say it, I think parents are often not empowered to be experts of their children, right? The way that our society is, it's like you need to look to everyone else.
Mm.
But there is this biological connection that develops, this internal instinct that develops, that you need to listen to. And even if your children are not biologically yours, the way that our body works, those same systems kick into place. So you are the expert of your child. No one can tell you every single detail about your child in the way that you can, right? And so I think in those moments of feeling like an imposter, because I think that's what happens and why it feels so overwhelming. It's like, who am I to be saying this? Who am I to be, questioning these professionals? I want you to tap into that like inner superhero inside of you, because I know if it was a life or death situation, you would figure out how that superhero comes out. And so maybe it's just calling that superhero out and being like, okay, this doesn't feel like life or death and it feels weird, but I'm going to call you out right now and I'm going to really own like, nope, I know what's best for my child and I at least want you to hear me out. It's not you're saying I want you to diagnose my child. You want your child to be properly evaluated and all of that, but you want to be heard in the process. You want to be part of that process. So don't be afraid to bring that superhero out.
Yeah, it's crunch time.
Mhm.
Not time
Exactly.
not time to be polite necessarily, time to just get what
Mhm.
you need in that moment, for sure. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, great advice. All right, Dr. Tay, on that note, we are going to jump on over to our lightning round now, where we are talking about just fun things to get to know you on a more personal level. Are you ready?
Okay.
Yeah. All right, let's do it. Um, let's see. What is your guilty pleasure TV show?
Oh, for sure. Well, any reality TV, but I love like The Real Housewives, things on Bravo. Oh, Keeping Up with the Kardashians. I know it's not on Bravo, but yeah, just like that you can release your mind and just watch what's going on.
Yeah, good choices for sure. Okay. What if you could only eat one food for the rest of your life? What would it be? Calories do not count.
Pizza, for sure. I love pizza. So little background behind the scenes of me. I don't have kids yet, and I'm still single. So sometimes I'm gonna totally own. I will order like a large pizza and then I'll eat it for a couple days. Like it's meals for a couple days. I do not get sick of it. I just love it. And honestly, a lot of times it's just cheese pizza.
Yeah, that sounds like a dream, honestly. That sounds amazing. If you ever want to hang and do that together, I'm down.
Okay, we should do
Yeah.
it.
What's one app you cannot live without?
I mean, it's definitely like the social media app. So the first one I always check is Instagram.
Yeah, you're not the first
Yeah.
person to say that on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no shame. What is something most people don't know about you?
This is a good one. Okay, here's a really random one. I actually had my second degree black belt. Um, when I was 13, I was in Taekwondo. It was something my grandma loved to do. I had zero interest in doing Taekwondo, and she was sick with cancer. And literally, one of her last wishes was that I started Taekwondo. So I did, and I stuck with it and got my second degree black belt. I did end up quitting because I had then started high school. And to get your third degree black belt, it was going to take another 5 years. And I was like, okay, that would be by the time I'm in college. And so then I pivoted at that point. But yeah,
Oh, what a great story. I'm sure she is very proud of you for doing that. Amazing.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, forget if she had her second or third degree black belt. I mean, she had done it herself,
I mean, damn, go
right?
grandma. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right. And last question here. If you could have any superpower, what would it be?
Mm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like, okay, I think it would be to physically fly. Because one of the things that I would love to do is travel more. And I'm trying to make that a reality without this, superpower. But I feel like to be able to explore the world, to be able to like get somewhere, like and just go, like that seems really, really cool. And I love connecting with people too, like and being able to connect and serve people or I know this sounds weird, but to connect it back to my business, but like my business is completely over telehealth. It'd be so convenient if I could just like transport myself to my patient's house, see them in one state, then transport myself to another patient's house. I feel like on many levels that would be awesome.
Yeah. Well, maybe one day.
One
You
day,
never know.
maybe.
All right, Dr. Tay. Well, we are just about ready to wrap up here, but before we go, please tell our listeners where they can find you.
Yeah. So, as I mentioned, I hang out a lot on Instagram. So, on Instagram, I'm the period doctor, DR period Tay. Same handle over on TikTok as well. So, those are kind of my places. And then the Facebook community that I mentioned. It is not live at the time we're recording this, but should be very, very soon. What the URL will be is facebook.com/groups /evolve autism. And so you actually, it exists now. If you want to go request, and then I'll let you in once it's officially launched, we can do that. And yeah, I do also, you can always email me, taylor@drtaylorday.com, if you have any questions in particular about the services that I offer.
Amazing. Thank you. And we'll make sure we link all of that in our show notes so that you can grab it easily. Dr. Tay, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me. It was fun, and I appreciate you being willing to create the platform that I could share about this, because I know you have to have some autism mamas listening to this, and for them to have a
Absolutely.
space where they finally feel seen and heard, and like something is dedicated to them. It's a really special experience.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Mama Work It podcast. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and would love if you could take a quick minute to leave me a review on whichever platform you're listening from, and maybe even send a note to a fellow mama friend recommending it. Reviews and recs help this podcast grow and reach more like-minded, awesome moms. And if you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click that button so we can stay in touch, girl. By the way, if you haven't checked out the Mama Work It website, please do. There are lots of free resources and great articles there that can help you with the juggle of work life, mom life, wife life, fill in the blank life. So head on over. Thanks again for being part of the tribe. I'll see you soon, but in the meantime, keep on working it, mama.